Well, people are still joining, but let's go ahead and get rolling today. You're hearing a slightly different voice this time, maybe in a different role as unexpected. My name is Dennis Toddy. I'm the director of the USDA Midwest Climate Hub, and I'm usually on these calls, but in a different role as just to answer questions. Usually you hear Doug Cluck at this point from NOAA in Kansas City, and Doug is out on vacation this week. So we're picking up for him and taking care of things while he's gone. Fortunately, we have one of our veteran presenters, Pete Boulay from the Minnesota DNR and Minnesota State Climate Office, presenting today. So we're confident that things will go very well in Doug's absence. Again, this is a monthly check-in on conditions, impacts, and looking ahead as what's coming. Obviously, we have some drought issues going on around us and in various forms. We'll talk about that. As usual, we welcome your questions. Please enter them as we go along, and we will take as many of those as we can at the end of this. We welcome, glad to have you here. So let's turn it over to Pete, and thanks for doing this, Pete.
Well, thanks, Dennis. Glad to be here. Going to go over a little bit of what's going on right now with the climate, the drought, and a little bit of peek in the future. Starting out with a picture of Lake Superior on the North Shore there, and I love this photograph because it shows both sides of Lake Superior. Looks very placid and inviting, but if you look in the background, there's fog out there and a little menacing. And that's kind of pretty much the message of this month's outlook and talk here is there's a lot that's going on in the weather right now that's pretty good, but there's also some menacing things too we'll have to talk about as well. So a little bit of information up front here. This is a collaboration between the state climatologists in the central region. We're with the American Association of State Climatologists here, our office in Minnesota. Got the various NOAA partners, USDA Climate Hub, and Midwest and High Plains Regional Climate Centers. Shout out to them. Also the National Drought Mitigation Center. The next webinar will be in August, 1 p.m. Presenter Brian Fuchs. He'll be on deck next, and also for us, if you want to look at the recordings of past webinars, you can do that too, and with those links there. So, let's see. So a little bit of what my outline will be, present conditions. So going over the temperature and precipitation ranks, 30-day temperature and precipitation, modeled soil moisture, a little bit on the drought impacts, and also outlooks with El Nino, and a short-term outlook for the 6 to 10 day, 8 to 14 day, and then August and the rest of summer too. And taking a peek at the autumn, and then that picture there is some dryness that's affecting corn late June, Tippecanoe County in Indiana. So here and there's some dryness showing up. So recent conditions. Here's a maybe a little bit better photograph of a crop. Here's soybeans on the U of M St. Paul campus, and the plot manager made sure I didn't include the water hemp that would be just off to the right of the photograph. So you wanted just the pretty part of the crop. So, weeds are a problem for everybody. April through June temperature ranks. So looking basically going back to April, we had a very wet spring across a good chunk of the northern plains. And then we're still kind of living off that spring wetness. June wasn't very wet for most places, but April and May were. And so if you put the 3 months together, for temperature, we had a very cool spring, and then it warmed up in June, and so we're below average overall across Minnesota, North and South Dakota, average, Iowa, and places to the south, and a little bit above average we get to Kansas. So temperature ranks just for June. It turned out to be a very warm month. Not quite as warm as June 2021, but it was very warm as well. Many places were above average, with a few exceptions. The Great Lakes area, Also, Montana and Wyoming were very close to average too for average temperature. Precipitation. So precipitation, wet spring showed up not only with the temperatures, but also with precipitation as well. So we had one of the wettest April through June's on record up in North Dakota. In Minnesota as well was above average, and this really kind of eased the drought quite a bit up there. It wasn't quite as wet. Some dryness showed up from Colorado, basically an arc from Colorado through Nebraska, Iowa into Illinois and Indiana. The spring fell below average there and near average for Kansas, Missouri, and Ohio. So looking just at June, things began to dry out, more so for some places than others. So Nebraska, much below average, driest spot compared to average, but pretty much most places were tilting below average. Some exceptions, Montana, Kansas wasn't too bad, and Ohio seemed to do okay. Now, this dryness that began in June continued into July, and this is really the theme of what's been happening this summer so far. Non-universally dry for everybody. A few places have been what I call lucky. They get those $1 million rains that happen in a strip across our region. And where those fall, things seem to be better than others. And you can see it on this map going back to late June and into July here. There's a strip of rain that fell across far southern Minnesota, another one across northern Missouri, and also northern Iowa got a touch of that too. So you can see that it's kind of a mosaic. A lot of places have been getting missed by those rain, showers and thunderstorms. You can see the kind of where they show up in the most departure there around the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and also in southern Missouri as well. So looking at temperatures, as you go farther east, closer to the normal, Indiana, Ohio, pretty close to normal, and also a good chunk of Michigan. But as you go farther west, it gets warmer compared to normal, especially in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, and basically anywhere west of the Mississippi seem to be where the heat has been most acute. And of course, there is an exception. Cook County received free air conditioner from Superior, and it was quite cool up there. So a little exception to the rule. Now, looking at soil moisture percentiles with that heat and the dryness, the soils that begin to dry out. Forgive me if the phone rings. We're in the office here, and there's always people calling about something here. So soil moisture profile percentiles. So what's going on is we're beginning to dry out. And the places that are getting missed by the rain, you can see it again here on this map, where the soil moisture percentiles are the lowest. So we're beginning to see more of this happening as we go into July. So looking at USDA topsoil moisture, the areas that's short to very short. So the places that are very dry, so greater than 50%, they're in the red. So the dryness has been going on longer for these places, especially as you go farther south, Nebraska and Kansas, Colorado, and also Missouri, Indiana too. So a little bit better as you go farther north, and really that's part of the wet spring still. We're still kind of have some soil moisture in reserve, especially as you go farther north along the Canadian borders where there's the most moisture. Corn conditions. Okay, looking at corn conditions, the national condition is pretty much unchanged, 64%. And what's really going on, it's varying quite a bit from state to state. So, some states improve, some states go down. Overall, the average stays about the same. So really, the bottom line with what's going on with corn is if you planted corn early, it's tapping that deeper soil moisture. This is the case in a lot of places like Minnesota, Illinois. The earlier corn has been faring better because the top 2 feet of the soil is the driest, and then there's still some residual moisture below that. So if your plants are able to tap that deeper moisture, you seem to be better off. Now, corn started out very late. We had that cool, wet spring, And so it started out behind, and the progress is still behind, more so than others, especially in Minnesota, where it's the farthest behind for silking. But most places are still falling behind the 5-year average. So another thing you could do, if you'd like to look at corn in your area, you could go to the Useful to Usable, the U2U website, where you can calculate your own corn growing degree days for your location. There's a web link down there, and you could do that for whatever place you'd like. So that might help you out for a better look at your specific location. Now, looking over to soybeans, it's doing fairly well as well. 61% good to excellent condition. Just 1% less than last week. So again, varies quite a bit, but not doing too bad right now. The places that are feeling it the most are where it's been the hottest, and down in Kansas, or the dryness is hitting there, and also Missouri. Anywhere where the drought is more advanced, the percentages are lower. And then the progress too, not as far behind as corn, but still falling behind the 5-year average overall, about 5% less than where we would be for the 5-year average for soybean setting pods. So looking at the drought monitor the past 2 months, so quite a bit of change. So the drought, basically the focus has been shifting to the east. So when we started out back in May, we had quite a bit of severe and extreme drought, especially it was in Montana, Colorado, Kansas, and some of that drought's still there 2 months later in July 19th, but it's been much reduced in the west, at least in some areas where they got the rain. The well-known Yellowstone area that got so much heavy rain. Definitely improved the dryness there. Wyoming has improved a little bit. Colorado has improved somewhat, but on the other side of the coin, there's been degradation in the situation. Pretty much, if you look at Missouri, going to Illinois, Indiana, and also in Minnesota and in Iowa as well. Especially, there's been a flash drought going on in southern Missouri, where they've degraded by 1 category in the past week. Lots of drought condition reports being reported in the southern half of Missouri as well. So looking at basically the change, the 8-week change, you really could see how kind of what's happened with the drought. It's been worsening, has been shifting to the east. This is looking back to May 24th to July 19th, and there's been quite a bit of improvement in the west, and drying out in the east, making things a little bit worse. So looking at rivers and streams, where in generally some things have definitely improved over time, and also some things are kind of a little bit behind as well. Looking at the big picture here, the wet spring and where the rain's been falling in June and even into July, you can see that there's still much above normal stream flow conditions. Looking at North and South Dakota, especially eastern South Dakota, is still doing pretty good. Northern Minnesota, and then gets to be more normal to below normal as you go farther south into Iowa, into Missouri, and then some much below normal stream flows, Nebraska, into Kansas, but you could see it also Indiana as well. So you could really see there's quite a bit of difference from stream to stream. The main stem of the Mississippi, got a plot of that. Well, first we'll talk about the Missouri River Basin. Just the basic, just here is still fairly low. You can see that we are here, still kind of well below the average, and the forecast is still staying below average. So still fairly low. There was all the snow is melted now and in the reservoirs. So we still have a little bit of room for more water there. Mississippi River, this is the map of the real-time stream flow, and really the main stem is in normal range. Smaller streams vary. Here's one big difference from last year at this time. The Mississippi River at Minneapolis was in the 4th percentile. Now it's in the average percentile. What's really happening with this, I guess I'll call a drought reboot, or the new drought of 2022, is it's affecting the smaller streams first, as you see them in Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, and somewhat Wisconsin too, especially in the northwest part. So the smaller streams are affected first. The bigger streams are still basically still got the water from the spring, and in the headwaters up in northern Minnesota was part of that really heavy spring precipitation. So there's been a lot of water to flow down the stream. One little snapshot, just taking a look at Lakes Michigan and Huron water levels for the last, about year and a half to 2 years, about 2 years, 2.5 years, since 2020. So it shows quite a bit of a fall from 2020 there. Back then, there was all those problems and with flooding like a Door County with high water, and with the waves would pick up and things like that too. So now, it's been slowly falling throughout the last year or so, and in 2022, still above average, but but not as high as it has been. So the water's above average, but we don't have the high water problems we had at least in 2020. So looking at some state impacts, so we got a lot of photographs of like the dry and the heat. So the heat affecting roads, like this road buckling in Champaign, Illinois on July 6th. This has been a common theme for where it's been getting really, really hot. And then, of course, some ponds have dried up. This is Clark County, Kansas, where one of the ponds there is completely gone. So starting to feel the effects of the heat and the dryness. So first we'll go to Kentucky and Ohio. Drought problems in Ohio after it was so wet this spring, so kind of a flip there. Temperatures not too bad. And looking at Lake Erie, smaller than average algal bloom predicted, so that's some good news there. And probably you can see it on that accumulated precipitation image there back to July 1st, where it isn't raining like in far western Kentucky. That's where the droughts are beginning to develop. Looking at Indiana, we had rapid drying in June, some beneficial rains in July, and the earlier planted corn is doing better than late planted corn, so that's kind of the same theme we've seen in other states as well. But the recent dryness, trees are beginning to show stress, and of course you have the brown lawns as well. So looking at Michigan, they've been faring quite well, even though it's been dry the last 30 days, except far north in the Upper Peninsula. Temperatures are near normal, so they're on that kind of eastern edge of everything, where the heat hasn't really reached that area. The Great Lakes states of Wisconsin and Michigan have been doing pretty good. Illinois, Champaign-Urbana had the 4th driest June on record, and statewide it was their 22nd driest June on record too. So June already started out dry. Did have a big multiple rounds of storms in northern Illinois that caused damage. There's a picture of Rockford, Illinois, some tree damage there as well. So just like many of the other states, there's been some storms and some welcome rains, but it's not universal. Iowa and Missouri, in general, the reports are that Iowa crops are looking pretty good. Corn is tasseling, but as you go farther north, there is a bit of stress in corn in the northern part of Iowa. As you get closer to northwest Iowa as well. The July 5th derecho did bring some needed rain to northern Iowa, so there's been some rain events to help things out, just not quite enough of them. In southern Missouri, is in moderate to severe drought. Many impacts noted on vegetation. This is a little snapshot of the drought condition monitoring reports. They're very useful at getting kind of what's really happening from here to there, what people are seeing on the ground. So Minnesota here, central and northern part of the state, there's really sufficient moisture. It's very green. anywhere from St. Cloud, so that's in central Minnesota, on northward. South of St. Cloud's a different story. The top 2 feet of soil are drying out in not only in southwest Minnesota, but just looked at a report this morning in southeast Minnesota. It's also getting about the same level of dryness there as well. Still some soil moisture in the 2 to 3 foot profile, but the top 2 feet are drying out. And just like the other states, some beneficial rains did hit southern Minnesota July 6th, really gave crops a boost. And July 14th really helped out corn and soybeans. And this picture here is kind of similar to the kind of storm events we've been having. There are some, but they're usually just very small. We just had another one last 24 hours in southwest Minnesota that just affected a few places. So south of North Dakota is faring the best. Things are quite green up there. Precipitation over the past 90 days still a surplus there. And they were suffering so much drought last year. Really, the wet spell that began last autumn continued through the winter and into the spring, and really eliminated things there. South Dakota is a little more hit or miss. It's wetter in the west, or wetter than in the eastern part of the state than the west, and of course they've been quite warm as well. And drought issues in South Dakota right along the border with Nebraska. In Kansas and Nebraska, this is where the heat is. It's very hot and dry for July so far, with extreme heat, with over 20 days of 100 degrees or more in western Kansas in July. And it might wind up being the warmest July on record in places. And along with that heat comes the elevated fire risk. And interestingly, sorghum is stressed in southwestern Kansas, and that's usually a drought-tolerant plant. So to see that is kind of noteworthy. And ponds are also being reported dry, and there's a photograph of desiccated sorghum in southwest Kansas. In Colorado, also hit with some heat extremes. It was one of the hottest heat waves on record there in the state. And also noteworthy are record high minimums. And actually, that's also a theme across the entire central region. Some places aren't really having record high maximums, but the minimums have been so warm. So really our overall warmth this summer so far is really being driven by the warm minimum temperatures. Tragically, there was heavy rains that fell on Cameron Peak Fire Burn Scar on July 15th that caused 2 deaths that with the mudslide that accompanying that. But overall, counts of severe thunderstorm warnings through June 30 in Colorado are the lowest in 15 years. So it's time to take a little look at the future. We'll look at the 7-day QPF, how much rain is going to fall, or at least predicted to fall over the next week. Take a peek at the 8 to 14-day outlook, August temperature, precipitation, and also September through November as well. So looking ahead for the next 7 days. So in general, we might get a little bit of a break of the current weather pattern we're in right now. There's at least some signs that some precipitation will fall for really the places that need it, some of the places that need it the most, where it's been the drought's been developing, kind of that eastern part, right along the Mississippi River area there. At least according to the outlook here, there is some rain forecasted there. Not everybody will get the rain. It'd be nice to see some more over Kansas, but it would be nice to see that rain happen from Missouri, Illinois into Indiana, and up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa too. So what about this? First, we'll look at the 6 to 10-day outlook. This is taking us July 26th to the 30th. And something we haven't seen in a while is a below normal temperature outlook for parts of the central region. So, maybe some pleasant weather, or maybe even rainy weather will happen. So below normal temperatures, at least for the end of July, for a lot of places. The exception is farther south. Kansas, Missouri, Illinois will be a tendency for above normal temperatures. But on the flip side, they also have the best chance for above normal precipitation. So I guess we'll have to wait and see there. So enjoy that break, because it looks like after that, the heat might return. So looking into August, the beginning of August, there's a tendency for above normal temperatures for most places except along near the Great Lakes. And then also precipitation kind of mirrors the 6 to 10 a little bit across the southern part of the region, with above normal precipitation and close to normal across the Great Lakes area, below normal North and South Dakota. Looking at the whole month of August, looks like the hot summer of 2022 is forecast to continue. So it goes forward with above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. We'll have to wait and see, but it really looks like the kind of the persistence of the heat will come back with just that little break we'll have at the end of the month here. How about farther in the future? Well, looking ahead, September through November, we have equal chances to above normal temperatures projected for much of the country, and below normal precipitation, with maybe equal chances across the far northern part of the area. So if there looks like there's any really relief to the drought, it doesn't look like it's in the cards. And that's kind of shown with the seasonal drought outlook that's valid from today through the Halloween. And it looks like there is drought development likely across a good chunk of the central region. So I guess the drought that we have right now might just hang around a while. Looking a little bit further ahead in the future, we're still under a La Nina advisory. That we're now going on year 3 or winter 3 of having a La Nina. So we have a better than 50% chance of La Nina. So at least it looks like there's a pretty good chance this will persist into early winter, and chances of an El Nino this winter are less than 10%. So looks like we might have our 3rd La Nina in a row. So looking at the summary a bit, after a brief break in the heat coming next week, then the warmth returns. In general, looks like above normal temperatures will continue through the autumn, and also a tendency for below normal precipitation that could persist in the autumn as well. So drought issues are likely to continue, but not universal. It looks like we'll still get these kind of thunderstorms that'll kind of put streaks of precipitation across the area. So, cross your fingers that one of these will fall over your plot of land and give you a boost. But there'll probably be other areas that'll be completely missed as well. No real large scale systems that give a lot of rain, at least in the near term. So for further information, you could look back at the past webinars and also look ahead for you could go to climate.gov, drought.gov. Look up our state climatologists and then regional partners as well. And thank you everybody for listening to me today. And if anybody has any questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them.
Great, thanks, Pete. I think you set a recent record for getting done the soonest in just over half an hour. Well done, getting through everything there. So
I'll try to talk slower.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll keep things to the point. Okay. We do have a handful of questions here.
Okay.
That's we'll address these here. We have, while I address a couple of them here, why don't you go back up to the El Nino or the La Nina outlook slide? Hope we can use that. We've got an update on report from Kentucky from Chip Zimmer saying that crops are in pretty bad shape in Kentucky. Corn may be done in some places because of the heat and lack of rainfall. The recent rainfall has been too late to save them. Unlike corn, has a critical time right around this tasseling period that you can do a lot of damage to it with stress. And that's probably causing the problem, some of the problems down there. Soybeans, unlike, can kind of limp their way along, and if you can get some late season precipitation, soybeans can work their way through. I also wanted to add one more onto the Iowa comment there too about the derecho. We did have some crop damage from the derecho, but it doesn't seem to have been too severe or long-lived. Okay, going back to the La Nina outlook here, we had a question asking about what's the possibility of La Nina could go into the spring and summer of 2023. And basically what you're seeing here, this doesn't go out into the spring of 2023. Is there a chance that La Nina could continue into the spring of 2023? It is possible, but it seems unlikely from the outlook here. We go to February, March, April, that we get back to more of the expectation now is near climatology, and that's what those thin lines are, is what are the average probabilities. So it doesn't look like La Nina will go beyond the year 3 here, but it is possible for that to happen. So, okay, Pete, we had a question that's an interesting question. See if you want to take this one or not.
Okay.
Does the precipitation map consider rainfall rate rather than just rainfall amount? It's wonderful to get 1 inch of rain if it comes over a day, but when it comes in 20 minutes, it's just not the same.
Yes, and that's been a bit of a problem with the kind of rain events we've had. What's been missing is, and not everybody would want one of these, but one thing that's really been missing is a giant mesoscale convective complex systems. There hasn't been a lot of those. And this is the time of year you get them. And those are the ones that'll bring you your, of course, they have severe weather with them too, but they can bring you your 1 to 3 inches of rain over, over more than a couple hours, when you're not in the kind of the tip of the spear of them, at least. So, in the northern part of the country here, we get those, and I haven't seen one yet. And what also would be nice to have is a big old slogging low pressure center that does happen sometimes in the summer, where you can have a wide area of better, more efficient rain. And we haven't really had that either. And kind of, we have a shot this weekend on Saturday to have something a little bit like it happening. Iowa and Minnesota has probably our best chance we've seen in a couple of weeks of more of a widespread rain, but really it's not looking like a monster system, and there will be people getting missed in that one too. So it's something to think about, but absolutely the kind of rains we've had are kind of those smallish thunderstorms that dump a lot of rain, but over a short period of
time. Yeah, and thanks for that, Pete. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, go ahead and keep entering them. We'll deal with them as much as we can here. And I think
I was going to add real quick. I was going to put in a slide for the winter forecast for La Nina, but since the outlook was equal chances for temperature and precipitation, I didn't think it was going to say much for the area. So,
and
like I said,
why don't you leave that right there? Because we got a question here too.
Okay.
That was from Nancy Garter. If we have a third La Nina winter, what are the likely consequences of that, and how unusual is it? And we did talk about this with some folks in the Climate Prediction Center yesterday afternoon. It's fairly unusual. We've only had 2, if you get home double dip, we'll call it triple dip. La Ninas, 3 La Ninas back to back. We've only had it happen twice since 1950, so this would be the 3rd one. So it's fairly rare, but does it mean anything different than we would expect during a typical La Nina winter? And that's and their comment was no. It doesn't really, just because it's a 3rd one doesn't change their outlook at all. They'll still lean towards a typical La Nina outlook for La Nina winter. Pete, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I looked a little bit into it. Like you say, there's only 2 other cases, so it's not a very deep record to look at. For this current La Nina period, I looked at least in the Twin Cities here. In 2021, January was 6.5 degrees above normal. January 2022, 5.5 degrees below normal. So I'm going to guess January 2023 will be exactly normal then. So, it's hard to really hang your hat on anything. The old conventional wisdom used to be December through February temperatures with a La Nina would be tendency of below normal pretty much everywhere from northern Missouri and intensifying as you go up into northwest Minnesota and to eastern North Dakota. That'd be your best chance for a below normal temperatures in a La Nina. And precipitation wise, above normal precipitation, North Dakota, Minnesota into Wisconsin, and maybe equal chances as you go farther south of there too. So, but we've also seen the opposite happen for La Ninas too. So it's like a good guidance to have, but it's definitely not one I take to the bank.
And one thing they did reiterate during the conversation yesterday is that there's no guarantees on La Nina or El Nino. There are other things that influence it. So it's gives us some guidance, but it's not a hard and fast, here's what's going to happen sort of thing. Okay, there's a couple ag ones here that I'll take. One from Bryce Anderson: with the big corn ratings in Iowa and Illinois, what can we infer about yield potential? The common thinking seems to be we've taken off the high end yield potential because of the late planting and fairly widespread some level of stress. So we've probably taken off the high end. I agree with you. I'm a little surprised. I agree with you, Bryce. I'm a little surprised things are as good as they are right now, but the crop condition maps still seem to be okay overall, not outstanding. So we still have potential to do some damage to the yield, but this little bit of easing that we've had, and maybe a little bit of easing next week on the way of temperatures and a little bit of precipitation as we are around tasseling here, may be enough to squeak us by and get closer to yield trend. I'd still say probably falling a little below trend, but fairly close. We're certainly not going to lose the big yield losses like we potentially did. And then I had a question: how is the drought affecting livestock? Hearing there's a purge of animals due to lack of feed in the West and conditions expected at harvest time. We did talk about this a bit yesterday. Do you remember what they were talking about in Kansas, Pete? I can't remember what Chip said.
It's not as bad as farther south. That's the ones making the news. Where you have the 4-mile long line of people taking their cattle to market, right? What state was that? Oklahoma or Texas?
Yeah.
It was Oklahoma. So it's happening there because there's a shortage of water and forage in western Kansas. So I think that's the place they were talking about, right? If I remember.
Yeah. Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas have seen by far the worst of it. Kansas and Colorado have seen some, but hasn't been as bad yet. There have been some sales, but not been as bad. So, okay.
And one comment I can make with the weather and crops is they're hopeful here in Minnesota that we haven't had a lot of 95-degree days during tasseling, and maybe the outlook doesn't have them. So we might escape the extreme heat in the critical period in the next week. So I guess maybe we're getting lucky. So that might also be the case in Iowa too over the next week, and maybe other places.
Okay, we have a couple. Well, we had one for what's something about harvest conditions, and then another question about end of the irrigation season in the Platte River based on current crop maturity. Both of those, I think, are a situation where it looks like overall we're likely to be warmer than average and still leaning towards the dry side. So, crop maturity is behind, but we'll still keep moving along. But we could have some early maturing or early death in places where things are a bit dry. So from the irrigation season, I think you're probably going to still need a decent amount of irrigation given the overall warmth that seems to be coming. So, okay, another question from Bryce Anderson regarding lack of slow-moving low. Is this due to the presence of La Nina related upper air features? You want to take a swing, Pete?
Wow.
I give you these.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm trying to think backwards to when this pattern changed. It's like we were wet in the spring, north, and then it's funny, the pattern's still there. It just shifted north into Canada. There's still really wet in southern southern Canada, along the border there. So what we're hopeful for is that the jet stream will come back, it'll shift south, and then we'll finally tap into some of that. But I'm at a loss for a good answer for that one. Don't
And
know.
and, and I think what you describe is somewhat the case, that we have this ridge of high pressure that has been fairly solidly set over the central U.S., which does happen in the summertime, but it's been a bit stronger at times this year. So it's pushed the precipitation northward. So the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, and like Pete said, now southern Canada. Actually, I saw a thing where someone was showing flooding on their land in southern Canada. I think it was Manitoba. So it's just pushed the storm systems up there. So we haven't had much in the way of low pressure or big systems overall, just little ones that squeak through or little bits that come across the top of the ridge. So
We're in the next week. I think we're supposed to get ridging in the Pacific Northwest and troughing in the Great Lakes, and that's part of what's going to happen, where we get our break for looks like about 5 to 6 days. And so wherever that sets up, and then of course we'll be on the northwest flow in the central region. So that's our shot to getting something through here at least. I guess we'll have to see what it pans out on it.
let's go to the Missouri River. How are the reservoir levels in the Missouri? They were about 80% of normal pool, as I recall, in May.
So let me get back to that. Where is that? Is this what you on?
Yeah.
A lot to look at.
And I don't know if you dove into that anymore or not, or
No, nothing other than it got a bit of a bump from last year because of the I want to say they said something about the Yellowstone rain events that gave them a little bit of a boost, but not enough. It's still they still want more water. They're still behind, still low. I'm trying to say how did they phrase it? They had a good term for it, not low, but I wish I would have put it on this slide because it would have helped me out. It's low, not as bad as it was, but it's still low. I guess
yeah,
is the quick
yeah.
answer.
That was, and I remember after the Yellowstone flood, people put out that no, this wasn't going to lead to major flooding downstream because there was plenty of capacity. And I think that shows with that little blip up there that the Yellowstone did put some additional water into the system, but it basically just kept things from worsening too much more. So you hit that right on. Okay, have a question. What was the weather like in Kansas in 1936 and Death Valley in 1913?
1936.
Yeah,
I'm assuming they mean July 1936.
I would think so, yes.
Yes. Well, if it's anything like it was up here in Minnesota, it wasn't pleasant.
And I assume that's in reference to the near record temperatures.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. If you go look anywhere in the central U.S. in 1936, you're going to find an awful lot of records, and state all-time records. In fact, in a number of places were set in that month.
Yeah, I didn't dig too much into the records, but I think there's one city that had 26 in the past month or so of hundreds. I can't remember which city that was, but
Was it Dodge City?
I mean,
It was somewhere in the Southwest.
yeah. I mean, obviously they're going backwards into June a little bit here if they're going up to 26 days, but yeah, it was interesting to see where July will pan out for places in Kansas, and it wasn't part of our area, but we've all seen the kind of the plots of Oklahoma in the same boat, even worse. So the heat, that's where the heat bubble is, and that's where it's been, and I'm curious to find out where that will shift in August when it comes back. And I don't have a really good handle on that. I'm keeping an eye on it. You look at I always look at like the 850 temperatures and then look for the 30, and where does that go? And 27, 30 starts getting warm. So just something to keep an eye on.
Okay. Kind of riffing on that a little bit, we have a question. Does a slow jet stream speed affect weather prediction accuracy out more than 2 days or so?
Wow. Yeah, I'm not as much of a forecaster as I used to be. I wish I was still in the midst of that. Wish we had somebody from the National Weather Service handy to help us on that
Well,
one.
I mean, the one thing we can talk about, and it's not so much jet stream, when we're talking about summertime rainfalls, um, when you don't have large systems like Pete was talking about, like large scale, low pressure areas where we can, see where moisture is lining up and who's going to get the rain and that sort of thing. Summertime rainfalls are more convective based. So you have a thunderstorm or a set of thunderstorms that happen one day, and where they go and the cold outflow from those can affect what happens the next day. So that's what makes forecasting convection really difficult, because you can look like you're going to have a system, but some convection can set up and shut it down the next day or move it a couple hundred miles away the following day. So there's a lot of things that come into play in summertime convection. Okay, please explain what flash drought means.
Ooh. Do we have a good definition of that somewhere with one of our partners? Because they talked about it on the latest drought monitor report had had it on there.
Here,
Let's
yeah,
see.
if you want to look for it, I can riff on this for a second.
Okay,
The,
I'll find it.
when you're talking about flash drought, the issue is rapidly developing drought. It's not different from other droughts. It's just conditions are worsening very quickly, and that tends to occur especially in the central U.S. in the middle of summer, because we typically get more precipitation and it's hotter. So when you don't get precipitation, you have hotter conditions, drought conditions worse. Um, so it's yeah, yeah. Kevin Lowe, rapid onset or intensification. There is a Kevin. I
That
think
work.
there is a specific definition of what is considered flash, and it's numbers on the drought monitor that Pete's trying to find right now. So he's got it from Nidus. But
Yep,
yeah,
there it is.
yep.
Yep. So if anybody wants to read all about every sector, it's in here, and they were talking about it in here. I mean, this is where they talk about Missouri, Minnesota, and Missouri flash drought conditions continue to develop. So for what caught my eye in this was usually when you do a one category degradation like that, that's for me, in my mind, a flash drought. For 1 week to the next, if you have a big area that degrades that fast. And if you look at some of the products like the drought condition report, you really can read what people are seeing on the ground, and you really start to see, there's just an explosion of reports of all kinds of things, and um, it's happening quick, I guess. But there should be. I don't know if the drought monitor has an official definition or not. Maybe we have to look on here and find out. Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple other quick questions here. Comments on La Nina on South American weather going forward. We would expect La Nina to continue to influence South American weather. It's outside the scope of what we do here, and I'd have to go back and remind myself. The one thing we did take note of is that if you look at the numbers for La Nina right now, it doesn't look that impressive, but the patterns, the atmospheric patterns, still look very La Nina-ish going on right now. So I would expect it to continue to affect South American weather going on. And then we have one on heat in Europe, and again, that's kind of out of the scope of what we do here in the north central U.S. But our minimum temperature is higher in the U.S. due to Gulf of Mexico moisture. It's due to moisture overall. Our overnight low temperatures are due to just more moisture in the air and some of carbon dioxide too. But we generally have more moisture in the atmosphere. Some of it is Gulf moisture. Some of it is just recirculated moisture from crops that are transpiring this time of year. that are keeping the moisture levels up. So I think that has covered everything that we have going on right now. So one last one is La Nina currently the dominant teleconnection for the north central region. I would say we probably can't say it's all, but I think La Nina is playing a big influence right now. So, all right, that's all the questions. Pete, do you have any last comments or last things you want to chime in with here?
Yeah, just the tie-in with the difference with how this is heat driven. Like in the Twin Cities right now, we're the 10th warmest July for minimum and the 31st warmest July for maximum. So there's the difference in how much that minimum is playing into the warm summer we're seeing.
Okay. Oh, there was one more I was going to toss in real quickly. Bryce Anderson asked about monsoonal flow and potentially producing some more rainfall in Nebraska. We don't talk about the monsoon too much because it's a southwestern feature, but if Pete were able to show you the new the 7-day precipitation forecast, there is a new one that's just come out, and it does have a bit more rainfall in the plains that looks like it's based on the monsoon. So Bryce picked that up. We may be seeing a little bit more rainfall in the plains potentially.
There it is.
Expecting to see. Yep.
It is there. Good point. Yep. Good pointing that out, Bryce.
Yep. Just expand that, another half state or so, and that's kind of what you're looking at. So
I'm waiting for that monsoon every year. I hope it comes.
All right.
It feels those MCS. So, all right.
So,
thanks, Dennis.
Right. Thanks very much, Pete. We'll go ahead and call it a day here. Hopefully, Doug will be back with us next month, and we can be back to our usual schedule. But appreciate all the questions, and have a good month. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you.